What if I told you that the smartest people who ever lived all failed at the exact same task? We're talking about geniuses. The kind of people who cracked secret Nazi codes during World War II. The kind of people who built machines that can translate dead languages. Scientists, mathematicians, historians. People who dedicated their entire careers to solving impossible puzzles. They all tried, and they all walked away defeated. Now here's what's going to blow your mind. The thing that beat them wasn't some advanced alien technology. It wasn't a supercomputer. It wasn't hidden in some secret government vault. It was a book, just a book, but not just any book. This thing is over 600 years old. And in all that time, across all of human history, not a single person has been able to read it. The pages are filled with writing that looks like it should mean something. The letters flow together like real words. There are sentences, paragraphs, even what looks like chapters. But nobody knows what any of it says. And that's not even the strangest part. The pictures inside this book are unlike anything you've ever seen. Plants that don't exist anywhere on Earth. Strange diagrams that look like they came from another world. Women floating in pools of green liquid, connected by tubes that go nowhere. Star charts showing constellations that astronomers have never identified. Someone sat down 600 years ago and spent months, maybe years, creating this thing. They used real ink, real parchment. They put serious effort into every single page. But why? Why would someone create an entire book in a language that nobody could understand? Was it meant to be secret? Was it written by a madman? Or is there something in those pages that we're just not smart enough to figure out? That's the mystery we're diving into today. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this book has driven people insane for centuries. You'll see why brilliant minds have wasted decades trying to crack its code. And you'll learn about the shocking new discovery that might finally change everything. But we need to start at the beginning. We need to go back to the day this book was found. Picture this. It's 1912. A Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich is traveling through Italy. Voynich wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. He was just a guy who loved old books. He made his living buying rare manuscripts from churches and monasteries, and selling them to collectors and libraries. On this particular trip, Voynich visited a place called Villa Mondragon. It was an old Jesuit college, crumbling and forgotten. The priests there were running out of money. They needed to sell some of their ancient collection just to keep the lights on. Voynich walked through their dusty library, running his fingers along the spines of hundreds of forgotten books. Most of them were religious texts. Prayer books, Bibles, nothing special. But then he saw something different. Tucked away on a bottom shelf, almost hidden, sat a small manuscript wrapped in plain vellum. It looked old, really old. Voynich pulled it out and opened the first page. What he saw made his heart stop. The writing wasn't Latin. It wasn't Greek. It wasn't any language he recognized, and Voynich knew a lot of languages. The letters were completely foreign. They curled and looped in ways he'd never seen before. Some symbols looked almost familiar, like they were trying to be letters from the alphabet. But they weren't, not quite. He turned the page. More strange writing. And then the illustrations began. Plants with roots that looked like human faces. Flowers with petals shaped like eyes. Leaves that spiraled in impossible patterns. Voynich had seen thousands of old botanical drawings in his career. These weren't like any of them. These plants didn't exist. He kept turning pages. His hands were shaking now. There were astronomical charts, filled with stars arranged in patterns no astronomer would recognize. There were drawings of tiny naked women bathing in green pools, their bodies connected by strange pipes and channels. Some pages folded out to reveal massive diagrams that seemed to map something. But what? A body? A universe? A dream? The whole book was like this. Page after page of beautiful, detailed, completely impossible content. All written in a language that shouldn't exist. Voynich bought the manuscript immediately. He didn't even try to negotiate the price. He knew he was holding something extraordinary, something that would make history. He brought the book back to London and showed it to every expert he could find. Linguists, historians, cryptographers, medieval scholars. He invited them to his home, placed the manuscript in their hands, and asked them all the same question. What does it say? Nobody knew. The experts studied the writing for weeks. They compared it to every known alphabet. They looked for patterns that might suggest a cipher or a code. They traced the origins of the ink and the parchment. Everything checked out. The book was genuinely old. It came from the early 1400s, somewhere in Europe. But the language? The language was a ghost. It appeared in no other document, no other manuscript, no other inscription anywhere in the world. It was as if someone had invented an entirely new way of writing and used it only once for this single book. Word spread quickly. The mysterious manuscript became famous among collectors and scholars. Everyone wanted to take a crack at it. Surely someone, somewhere, could figure out what it said. But years passed, then decades. Voynich died in 1930 without ever learning the book's secrets. His widow held on to it for a while, then sold it to another dealer. Eventually, it ended up at Yale University, where it sits to this day. And in all those years, through all those hands, past all those brilliant minds, one thing never changed. Nobody could read it. Not one word, not one sentence, not even a single letter with certainty. The book had beaten everyone who tried, and it was just getting started. Because here's what nobody realized back then. This manuscript wasn't just going to stump a few curious scholars. It was going to become the most analyzed, most studied, most obsessed over document in human history. Governments would throw resources at it. Supercomputers would be programmed to crack it. Artificial intelligence would be unleashed on its pages. And still, after everything, the book would keep its secrets. At least, that's what everyone thought. But something changed recently. Something big. And what researchers found might finally explain why this 600-year-old mystery has lasted so long. The answer, it turns out, was hiding in plain sight the whole time. We just weren't looking at it the right way. Of course, here is the expanded Part 2, written in simple, engaging, and natural English. Picture this. It's 1912. A man named Wilfred Voynich is walking through the quiet, shadowy halls of an old Italian monastery. The air smells of dust and old paper. Voynich isn't a tourist. He's a book dealer. His entire life is about finding forgotten treasures hidden in places just like this. He's done it many times before. He expects to find some interesting old prayer books, maybe a lost letter from a scholar. He does not expect to find the thing that will steal the rest of his life and the lives of so many others. His eyes scan the shelves, piled high with manuscripts that haven't seen the light of day in who knows how long. And then he sees it. It isn't gleaming. It isn't calling out to him. It's just a small, worn, humble book sitting there like it was waiting. He pulls it down and opens it. In that moment, in the silent monastery, his world changed forever. The first thing he would have noticed were the pictures. They were unlike anything in any other medieval book. There were pages and pages of plants, but not normal plants. These were strange, twisted, fantastical things. Leaves that spiraled in impossible ways. Roots that looked like strange organs. Flowers that seemed to bloom from a dream, or maybe a nightmare. They were painted with care, with green and blue and red, but they were drawings of a botany that existed only in this book. Then he would have turned the page and found the women. Dozens of them. They are naked, bathing in strange, interconnected pools of bright green water. The pools are linked by elaborate, intricate tubes and pipes, like some kind of medieval plumbing diagram or a bizarre anatomy chart. The women look serious, some pointing, some sitting in these green baths. It's not a playful scene. It feels scientific, but a science we don't understand. Further in, the book shifts to the cosmos. There are circular charts, filled with stars and strange symbols. But the constellations are unknown. They don't match the patterns of the night sky that any astronomer, then or now, has ever recorded. They are maps to a different heaven. And there are more sections: herbal, biological, astronomical, and what looks like a recipe section, with hundreds of short paragraphs, each next to a drawing of a different star or plant. But all of this, the weird plants, the bathing women, the fake stars, was just the decoration. The real heart of the mystery, the thing that would bring the world's greatest minds to their knees, was the text. Page after page, line after line of beautiful, elegant, utterly baffling script. The letters are fluid, like a skilled hand wrote them with a confident quill. Some look a little like Latin letters, others like simplified Arabic numerals, others like nothing at all. They flow together in words. The words group into sentences. The sentences fill the pages in neat paragraphs. It asterisk looks asterisk like language. It asterisk feels asterisk like language. You can almost hear the whisper of a voice behind it. But it is a language spoken by no country, no people, no historian on earth. Wilfrid Voynich held that book, feeling the old vellum under his fingers. He knew he had found something extraordinary. But in that moment, he probably thought, this is a fantastic find. A mysterious illustrated manuscript from the medieval period. The experts in London and Paris will love this. They'll tell me what it is. He had no idea that he was holding a ghost, a 600-year-old thought that refused to be heard. He bought the manuscript, along with other books, and took it to the world. He showed it to the best cryptographers, the most famous historians, the top linguists. Imagine the scene. A learned professor in a dark wood-paneled study, putting on his spectacles, leaning in with a confident smile. He'd seen dozens of ciphers. His eyes move across the first page. The smile fades. He turns a page, then another. His brow furrows. He checks the letter combinations. He looks at the word repetitions. He compares it to known cipher methods from the time. Nothing fits. The confidence drains from his face. He looks up at Voynich and shakes his head. I'm sorry, I have no idea. The greatest minds of the early 20th century were stumped. They confirmed the book was physically old, probably 15th century. The vellum was real. The ink was genuine. This wasn't a modern fake. Someone, in the time of Joan of Arc, sat down for months, maybe years, and painstakingly wrote this entire book. They drew these bizarre illustrations. They filled 240 pages with this flowing script. They used expensive materials. This was a monumental effort. No one does that for no reason. So the question began to burn. What was it? A secret alchemy manual? A heretical religious text? The notebook of a madman? A lost language from a vanished culture? Or, as some began to whisper, was it all just an elaborate, beautiful hoax? Maybe a clever forger in the Middle Ages created a nonsense book to sell to a rich, gullible noble who wanted a mysterious magical text for his library. But that idea had a problem, a big one. A skilled medieval forger making a fake book would make something that looked mysterious, but was ultimately simple. They might scramble some Latin, draw some odd pictures. But the text of the Voynich Manuscript does something extraordinary. When modern scientists finally put it through computers centuries later, they found it follows something called Zipf's law. This is a very specific mathematical pattern found in all real human languages. Of appear very frequently, while longer, more complex words appear less often. The Voynich text follows this pattern perfectly. It has the statistical heartbeat of a real language. Creating a fake text that does that, without computers, in the 1400s would be almost a bigger miracle than the book itself. So, when Voynich discovered it, he unlocked a double mystery. First, the obvious one. What does it say? But second, and perhaps more profound, who was this person? Imagine them, sitting by candlelight, a quill in hand, their mind occupied with a world of green pools and imaginary stars. They were creating a complete, coherent, and massive document in a script no one else could read. Were they alone? Were they afraid of being understood? Or were they desperately hoping that someone someday would understand? Were they preserving knowledge that was too dangerous to write in a normal way? Hiding their deepest thoughts in plain sight, creating a private universe on parchment? Wilfrid Voynich thought he had found a rare book. He didn't know he had found a mirror. A mirror that for the next 100 years would reflect back the frustration, the genius, and the stubborn hope of everyone who looked into it, seeing not the book's secret, but their own relentless desire to solve the unsolvable. But the obsession, the true madness of the Voynich Manuscript, was just beginning. What happens when you take the most brilliant minds on the planet and give them one simple task? Read this book. That's it. Just tell us what it says. Sounds easy, right? Now what if I told you that these geniuses, the same people who cracked codes that saved millions of lives during wartime, who solved mathematical problems that seemed impossible, all failed at this one simple task? Not just failed completely. Failed spectacularly. Failed in ways that drove some of them to the edge of madness. This is the story of the obsession, the decades of brilliant failure, and the moment when the Voynich Manuscript proved it was smarter than everyone who dared to challenge it. Let's start with the codebreakers. During World War II, the United States had a secret weapon. It wasn't a bomb or a plane. It was a team of cryptographers. These were the people who intercepted enemy messages and figured out what they said. They broke Japanese military codes that seemed unbreakable. They decoded communications that helped win battles and save countless lives. After the war ended, some of these cryptographers were looking for a new challenge, and someone handed them the Voynich Manuscript. Think about it. These men had just defeated the combined intelligence agencies of enemy nations. They had cracked codes designed by military geniuses. Surely a medieval book written by some unknown author would be child's play. William Friedman was one of the best. He's considered the father of American cryptography. This man broke codes that changed the course of history. He assembled a team of experts, all veterans of wartime codebreaking, and they began their assault on the Voynich Manuscript. They worked on it for years, not weeks, not months, years. They tried every technique they knew. They looked for repeating patterns that might reveal a cipher key. They analyzed letter frequencies. They compared the text to known codes from different time periods. They built charts and graphs and mathematical models. Nothing worked. Friedman became obsessed. He studied the manuscript in his spare time for over 3 decades. He was convinced the text was written in an artificial language, something constructed with specific rules, like a medieval version of Esperanto. But he could never prove it. He could never crack a single word. He died in 1969 without solving the mystery. The book had beaten him. But Friedman wasn't the only one. Across the Atlantic, British codebreakers took their turn. These were the men and women who had worked at Bletchley Park, the secret facility where they broke the Nazi Enigma machine. The Enigma was considered unbreakable. It used a complex system of rotors that could create billions of possible combinations for every message. The British cracked it anyway. They built machines that could decrypt Nazi communications in real time. Winston Churchill called the Bletchley Park team his golden geese. Their work shortened the war by an estimated 2 years and saved millions of lives. So naturally, some of them looked at the Voynich Manuscript and thought, how hard could this be? John Tiltman was one of the most respected cryptographers at Bletchley Park. After the war, he spent years analyzing the manuscript. He made detailed studies of how the letters were formed. He identified patterns in how words were structured. He even figured out that the text seemed to have specific rules about which letters could appear next to each other. But understanding the rules wasn't enough. He still couldn't read a single word. The language, if that's what it was, remained completely unknown. Tiltman admitted defeat. He said the manuscript was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It followed patterns like a real language, but it matched nothing in the historical record. It was a ghost, a shadow of meaning that vanished whenever you tried to grab it. The failures piled up. Academic linguists tried their hand. They compared the Voynich text to every known language family: European languages, Asian languages, African languages, ancient languages that had been dead for millennia. Nothing matched, not one. Historians dug through archives looking for any mention of the manuscript. They traced its ownership back through centuries. They found letters suggesting it had passed through the hands of emperors and alchemists. But nobody in history had left any clue about what it said. Amateur sleuths jumped into the fray. People from all backgrounds became fascinated by the mystery. Engineers, teachers, retirees, students. The manuscript became a global puzzle, and thousands of people thought maybe they could be the one to crack it. Some claimed success. A professor announced he'd decoded the text as a Turkic language. His translation fell apart under scrutiny. Another researcher said it was written in abbreviated Latin. That theory couldn't explain most of the pages. Someone else claimed the whole thing was written by Leonardo da Vinci as a child. There was no evidence for this at all. Theories multiplied like weeds. The manuscript was a medieval hoax designed to con a rich buyer. It was a secret diary written by a woman who couldn't publish openly. It was an alchemical text designed to be understood only by initiates. It was a health manual from a lost civilization. It was a message from extraterrestrial beings. None of these theories held up, but they showed something important. The Voynich Manuscript had become more than a puzzle. It had become an obsession, a kind of madness that infected everyone who studied it too closely. There's even a name for this phenomenon. Researchers call it Voynich disease. It's what happens when a smart person spends too long staring at those impossible pages. They start seeing patterns that aren't there. They become convinced they're on the verge of a breakthrough that never comes. They sacrifice careers, relationships, and mental health chasing a solution that always stays just out of reach. The manuscript doesn't just defeat people, it consumes them. And the really strange part? The harder people looked, the weirder the manuscript became. Carbon dating proved the parchment was genuinely old. It came from the early 1400s. The ink was consistent with medieval formulas. The binding was authentic to the period. This wasn't a modern forgery. Someone, 6 centuries ago, had actually sat down and created this thing. But who? And why? Statistical analysis showed the text wasn't random. It had the mathematical fingerprints of real language. Words appeared with predictable frequencies. Sentence structures followed consistent patterns. Whoever wrote this wasn't scribbling nonsense. They were communicating something. But what? That's the question that haunted every researcher. The patterns were there. The rules were there. Everything pointed to meaningful content, but the meaning itself remained locked away. By the end of the 20th century, the Voynich Manuscript had defeated hundreds of the smartest people on the planet. Codebreakers, linguists, historians, mathematicians, computer scientists. All of them had tried. All of them had failed. The book sat in its library vault at Yale, silent and patient, waiting for the next challenger. And then, just when it seemed like humans had reached their limit, something new appeared on the horizon. Something that could analyze text in ways no human brain ever could. Something that didn't get tired or frustrated or obsessed. A new kind of mind entered the game. Artificial intelligence was about to take on the greatest mystery in literary history. And what the machines discovered would change everything we thought we knew about this impossible book. So here we are, century after century, genius after genius. And this strange little book has defeated every single one of them. The codebreakers who stopped wars couldn't crack it. The linguists who spoke 20 languages couldn't identify a single word. The mathematicians who could see patterns in chaos found nothing but dead ends. But then something changed. A new player entered the game, and this player didn't get tired. It didn't get frustrated. It didn't give up after months of staring at the same pages. This player could analyze millions of combinations in seconds. It could spot patterns that human eyes would never catch. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. And what the machines discovered about the Voynich Manuscript shocked everyone. Let me take you back to 2016. A team of researchers in Canada decided to try something nobody had done before. They fed the entire Voynich Manuscript into a sophisticated computer program. This wasn't some simple translation software. This was cutting-edge machine learning, the kind of technology that powers self-driving cars and facial recognition. The computer's job was simple. Look at every letter, every word, every sentence. Find the patterns. Tell us what language this could be. For weeks, the machine worked. It compared the Voynich text against every known language on Earth. It analyzed letter frequencies. It studied how words connected to each other. It mapped the structure of sentences. And then it spit out an answer that nobody expected. Hebrew. The computer said the manuscript was most likely written in encoded Hebrew. Specifically, it suggested the text used a technique called alphagrams, where the letters of each word were scrambled in a specific way. The researchers were stunned. Could it really be that simple? Had the answer been hiding in plain sight for 600 years? They tested the theory. They took some Voynich words and tried to unscramble them using Hebrew letter patterns. A few words seemed to make sense. One phrase translated to something like, "She made recommendations to the priest." Headlines exploded. News outlets around the world declared the mystery solved. Finally, after all these centuries, a computer had cracked the uncrackable code. But hold on. Other researchers looked at the Canadian team's work. They ran their own tests. They checked the translations. The grammar didn't match up with medieval Hebrew texts. And the whole alphagram idea had holes that couldn't be explained. It wasn't the answer, not even close. But here's what mattered. The AI had proven something important. The Voynich Manuscript wasn't random nonsense. It followed mathematical rules, real rules, the kind of rules that only exist in genuine languages. Someone 600 years ago had written something real, something meaningful. The computer confirmed it. Now the race was truly on. More researchers jumped in with their own AI experiments. Teams from the United States, Britain, Germany, and Japan all started feeding the manuscript into increasingly powerful machines. Each team used different approaches, different algorithms, different theories about what the text might be. Some computers suggested the language was a lost dialect from the Middle East. Others pointed toward ancient Turkish. A few even suggested it might be an early form of artificial language, something invented purely for this book. None of the answers held up completely. But each experiment taught us something new about how the manuscript worked. We learned that the text had consistent internal rules. We learned that certain symbols appeared more often at the beginning of words, others at the end. We learned that the writing wasn't random, even if we couldn't understand it. The machines were circling something. They just couldn't quite grab it. Then came 2019, and everything changed again. A British academic named Gerard Cheshire made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the research community. He claimed he had solved the Voynich Manuscript, not partially, not theoretically, completely, and he said he did it in just 2 weeks. Cheshire's theory was bold. He believed the manuscript was written in Proto-Romance. This was a lost language that existed before Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French split into separate tongues. Imagine a linguistic ancestor that gave birth to all these modern languages. That's what Cheshire claimed to have found. According to him, the strange letters weren't a code at all. They were simply an unusual alphabet that medieval scribes used to write down a spoken language that had no standard written form. The writer of the Voynich Manuscript had invented their own way to capture sounds on paper. Cheshire published his findings. He provided translations of several passages. He explained the grammar. He identified the sounds each letter represented. His work was detailed, confident, and convincing. For a moment, it seemed like the mystery was finally over. But the academic world pushed back hard. Linguists examined Cheshire's translations. They found inconsistencies everywhere. Words that should follow his rules didn't follow them. Sentences that should make sense came out as nonsense. The grammar he described didn't match how Proto-Romance languages actually worked. One expert called the theory a series of unverifiable claims. Another said the translations were more imagination than linguistics. University of Bristol, where Cheshire worked, distanced itself from his findings. Once again, hope collapsed. But something fascinating happened in the aftermath of Cheshire's attempt. Instead of giving up, researchers became more determined. They realized they were getting closer. The patterns were becoming clearer. The AI analysis had narrowed down the possibilities. Cheshire's Proto-Romance idea, while flawed, had sparked new thinking about how the manuscript might work. What if the text really was a spoken language that was never standardized in writing? What if some medieval person had created their own personal alphabet to record knowledge that was traditionally passed down only through speech? This would explain why no matching documents exist. This would explain why the letters look almost familiar, but not quite. This would explain why computers can detect language patterns but can't identify the language itself. The manuscript might not be a code at all. It might be something much stranger. A one-of-a-kind writing system invented by a single person, used once and never replicated. And if that's true, cracking it might require something no computer can provide. It might require finding a connection to whoever wrote it, understanding their world, their knowledge, their reasons for creating something so elaborate and so secret. The AI brought us closer than ever before. It proved the text is real. It showed us the patterns. It eliminated thousands of dead-end theories. But the final piece of the puzzle? That might still need a human touch. And the strangest part is this. The answer might already be sitting in the manuscript itself. Not hidden in the strange letters. Not buried in the mysterious symbols. But in those impossible plants. Those bizarre astronomical charts. Those strange naked women bathing in green pools. What if the pictures are the key? What if we've been so focused on reading the words that we completely missed what the images have been trying to tell us all along? That's what one group of researchers started to believe. And what they found when they looked closer changed everything we thought we knew about this 600-year-old mystery. What if I told you the biggest clue in the Voynich Manuscript was never the writing at all? What if the answer has been staring at us from those strange drawings this whole time? And what if we finally figured out what those impossible pictures actually mean? Stay with me. Because what researchers discovered recently might be the closest we've ever come to solving this 100-year-old puzzle. For decades, everyone focused on the text. That made sense. If you want to understand a book, you read the words. But the Voynich Manuscript doesn't play by normal rules. The words refuse to be read. So a few years ago, some researchers decided to flip the approach completely. Forget the letters. Look at the pictures. And that's when things got really interesting. Remember those strange plants that fill so many pages? The ones that don't match any known species on Earth? For years, people assumed they were fantasy. Made-up flowers from the imagination of a medieval artist. But a botanist named Arthur Tucker had a different idea. Tucker spent years comparing Voynich plants to real specimens, not European plants. That had been tried before. Instead, he looked at plants from the Americas, specifically from Mexico, and he found matches. Not perfect matches, but close enough to make serious researchers pay attention. One Voynich plant looked remarkably like a species found only in central Mexico. Another resembled a cactus that grows in specific regions of the American Southwest. A third matched a flower that indigenous people used for medicine. Now think about what this means. The Voynich Manuscript dates to the early 1400s. That's almost 100 years before Columbus sailed to the Americas. If these plants are really from the New World, then either our dating is wrong, or someone traveled between the continents much earlier than history tells us. Or there's a third option. Maybe the manuscript was written later than we think, and someone very carefully made it look older. The mystery deepens instead of clearing up. A Tucker's discovery opened a door. Suddenly, researchers weren't just looking at the plants as random artwork. They were treating them as potential evidence. Real clues about who wrote this book and why. Other experts started examining the astronomical charts with fresh eyes. One researcher noticed that certain diagrams showed the movement of celestial bodies in ways that suggested a specific location on Earth. By analyzing the angles and positions, she calculated that whoever drew these charts might have been observing the sky from somewhere around northern Italy. Another team studied the women bathing in those strange green pools. For years, people assumed these were magical or alchemical illustrations. But a historian pointed out something everyone had missed: the poses, the groupings. What if the Voynich Manuscript wasn't a book of magic at all? What if it was a medical manual? A guide to herbal remedies in healing baths written by someone who developed their own secret notation system? This theory gained more support when researchers looked at who might have owned the book over the centuries. Letters found with the manuscript suggest it once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II of Prague. Rudolf was famous for collecting unusual texts about medicine, alchemy, and natural science. He paid a fortune for the Voynich Manuscript because he believed it contained lost medical knowledge. Was he right? Here's what we know for certain today. The Voynich Manuscript sits in the Bimeki Rare Book Library at Yale University. Anyone can view the entire book online. Every page has been digitized in high resolution. Thousands of people around the world are still working on it right now. And the tools are better than ever. New AI systems trained specifically on medieval texts are being developed. Researchers are using satellite imaging technology to reveal faded writing that the naked eye can't see. Chemical analysis of the ink has identified specific ingredients that might narrow down where the book was made. We're closer than ever. But we're not there yet. And maybe that's the most fascinating part of this whole story. In an age where we can sequence the human genome, land robots on Mars, and carry supercomputers in our pockets, one handwritten book from the Middle Ages still has us beaten. Think about everyone who has tried. The brilliant minds, the powerful machines, the countless hours spent by researchers who dedicated years of their lives to these pages. And still the book keeps its secrets. What does that tell us? Maybe it tells us that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved quickly. Maybe the Voynich Manuscript has lasted this long because cracking it requires something we haven't developed yet. A new way of thinking. A breakthrough in linguistics. A discovery about the past that changes everything we know about the medieval world. Or maybe the answer is simpler than anyone imagines. Maybe one day someone will look at the right page, make the right connection, and suddenly it all makes sense. Like a puzzle that seems impossible until you find that one piece that unlocks the whole thing. That person could be a university professor with decades of experience. Or it could be an amateur detective working in their bedroom. It could be a computer program running through billions of possibilities. Or it could be a kid who sees something that all the adults missed. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't care about credentials. It just waits, patient, silent, ready to reveal its secrets to whoever finally figures out the key. For 600 years, this book has watched empires rise and fall. It survived wars, fires, and centuries of neglect. It passed through the hands of emperors and scholars and curious collectors. Everyone who touched it felt the same thing. The certainty that something important was written in those pages. The frustration of not being able to understand it. And now it's our turn. We have tools that Wilfred Voynich never dreamed of. We have computers that can process information millions of times faster than the human brain. We have global networks of researchers sharing discoveries in real time. We have 6 centuries of failed attempts to learn from. The question isn't whether the Voynich Manuscript will be solved. The question is when, and by whom. Will it be the artificial intelligence that finally spots the pattern everyone missed? Will it be a linguist who realizes the text matches an obscure dialect that history forgot? Will it be an archaeologist who discovers a second manuscript that provides the missing context? Or will the answer come from somewhere nobody expects? One thing is absolutely certain. Whoever cracks this code will become famous overnight. Their name will be remembered alongside the greatest puzzle solvers in history. They'll be the person who finally did what centuries of geniuses couldn't. And the clock is ticking. Right now, as you watch this, someone somewhere is staring at those strange pages. They're looking at the impossible plants, the mysterious women, the unknown stars. They're trying to hear what a medieval writer was desperately trying to say. That person might fail like everyone before them. Or they might be the one who finally breaks through. 600 years of silence. And maybe, just maybe, the book is ready to talk. The only question left is this: are you paying attention?